right, how's everyone doing? Good. Yeah, so I think after we finish today, we only have really 4 more classes, and then we'll take a break. I don't know if you guys saw the message that Daisy is going to be coming here on Monday. And so she's going to be answering questions about what would be the next steps, like after the last course, like what are the things, that you can start thinking about with continuing with Code the Dream and things like that. So if you have any questions, like think about them and then bring them to her on Monday. All right. I think we're going to continue. We're going to just look at the To-Do app again. Since last time we kind of rushed at the end. So we're going to see, just kind of review it. Just as a review, remember that we have the code here to load Sinatra and then load SQLite 3. And then we're connecting to a database. And then we have 2 actions, these handlers for Sinatra. So we have the handler that handles when you first come and you want to see the list of to-do items. And then you have the handler here that inserts into the database a new to-do item. Okay. And so one is just a get, and the other one's a post. Okay. That's how they're differentiated. They're really the same URL, right? They have the URL is just /, but one is you access it by using a get request, and the other one you access it by using a post request. And then here's the form. So this is the form. That's when the form gets submitted, is going to go to that URL / using a post request. And then these are the fields that are going to be submitted in the form. So one is this one, which is the title. And then that's the only one that's the only field that's going to be submitted. So only things that have name, only those fields that have name are the ones that actually get submitted. If you don't put a name on it, it's going to appear in the form, but the information is not going to be submitted, right? So for example, if I added another text field, but I didn't put a name, and I submit the form, the information is actually not going to be submitted. So then let's test it. We have one more thing. So then we also have the ERB. So this thing right here, ERB main, just says use at the end here, use the main template. With the post, it also uses the same template, right? So in both cases, is using the same template main, which is the file main.erb. And then right here, we have that template main.erb. So we have the form at the beginning, and then we have some embedded Ruby that's just showing us a list of all the items that we are adding to our to-do list. So I'm gonna run that Ruby app.rb. -p port. If I open it, see where do you run? Key. So yeah, so I can add something else like by water. It just adds something to it. So any questions on that so far? Yep.
I keep having trouble with it. I can't make it work. It keeps telling me that I don't have the file for the file, but I got the file.
Yeah.
It keeps telling me that file different system. I got it. You think?
Yeah. So where your file is, to do this.
Ready?
Yep.
Tell us.
Yeah.
Question,
So
I think I missed what you said about name.
and so
Yeah. Can go over it again. Yeah. So so this is my form, right? And then when I submit the form, so here when I click on add, it's going to submit the form, right? So in your form, right now I just have one input element. Well, I have two input elements, right? I have this one that's of type text, and then this one that's of type submit.
the command.
When I submit the form, it's only going to send that one of type, the text field. It's not going to send this one. And that's because this is the only one that has a name.
That's connected to title.
Well, yeah, I'm telling the form, submit the field title, and then the value is going to be whatever the user typed. Yeah. So so if I wanted to submit something else, like another field, I could do. I have to add a name there, right? So it's very important to not forget the name. And then if I remove that name, even though it has all the information, the information is also actually not going to be submitted when I submit the form. And when you're submitting the form, you're submitting, okay, for title, but there's some value for title, and then for your other values, there's going to be some value. Yeah.
Are you recording this too?
Yeah. I'll send you the. Yeah. Okay. So yeah. Any other questions? Already used?
Address already.
Oh, you might have Sinatra running in a different terminal. Sorry? What do you mean with multiple forms?
So we have like different titles.
Oh, are you talking about this particular example or just in general?
Like we had another one that said,
Another ERB template. So yeah, so that depends. So that would be like a different action. I think from the homework, maybe the Chuck Norris example, right? So this right here tells you which template to render for that action, right? So if you wanted to render another template, you can do an if statement here. So you can do if and then some condition. So let's say params say so if that condition evaluates to true, then it's going to render the main template. If it doesn't evaluate to true, it's going to render the other template. And so this logic is inside your Sinatra action. And then, yeah, so you can evaluate different templates depending on some logic.
But they're two different files?
Yeah, they have to be two different files. Yep. Yeah, this is just telling Sinatra, like, okay, which file to use, right? So here is saying use the main file, main.erb. Here saying use the other .erb file. You can have something more complicated where you can have else if params else, and then you have another ERB. Okay. So here you have three different possible templates that you could render in this action. One could be the main.erb, other2.erb, and then other.erb. Okay, any other questions? All right. Let's see. I have. Oh, yeah. Okay, so now, like this, there's a few, clunky things here. Let's say that I add something. So add fast food or eat fast food. So I add that. Okay, so it looks, like I added another item. So now let me try refreshing this page. And you see that the browser gives you this window, and it says, confirm form resubmission. The page you're looking for, use information that you enter. Returning to that page might cause an action you took to be repeated. Do you want to continue? So that's kind of weird, right? So what's happening here is that when we submitted the form, the browser went and did a post request. Remember that's what we told the form to do. We told the form to do a post request to that URL. So when we were on this page right here, let me just cancel right here. When we're right here, we're seeing this by doing a post request to that URL. Right. So now when we try to refresh, the browser is again going to try to do another post request to that URL using the same information. So what happens is that we would be adding, another item. So let me just do that. So I'm going to do continue. You can see that it added eat fast food again, right? And that's because we did another post request just by refreshing the page. So that's kind of clunky, right? So what we want to do instead is, or what's done is that in your post request, you tell the browser to go to another URL, and that's what's called the redirect. So what we're going to do is that when we submit our post request, we're going to go to this action, the post action, and then we're going to add our task to the database. But instead of just rendering a template here, so instead of showing the list of tasks, we're going to tell the browser to go to another URL immediately. So the command for that is redirect to and then you give it the URL that you want to send the browser to. So by default, the redirect is going to go to that other URL and is going to do a GET request instead of a POST request. So now the user is back on the original page that they started from. So now I don't need this anymore, right? I don't need to load all the tasks, and I don't need to load a template, because I'm not going to be rendering any template. I'm not going to be rendering any HTML. What I'm sending back is just a message for the browser to go to another page. So if I do that, then I'm just going to go, I'm here, and then I'm going to do things. I think, oh, it's just redirect, not redirect _2. And that's from Rails. So let me go back. Okay, so you see that it added the item, but now if I refresh, it doesn't give me that warning anymore, right? And that's because it redirected me immediately to that other URL. So any questions? Yeah.
To go to the slashes, are those typically the same URL, or
they're the same URL, but the server is going to respond differently, because in one you're using the GET and then the other you're using the POST. So the URL is the same, but the server responds with different information based on what type of request you're asking. Any other questions? Okay. So now, let's say that we wanted to, complete one of these items. So what I'm thinking of doing is, like, if I click on one of them, then it marks it as complete. So yeah, I'm going to do an href, right? A link. So let me go here to my template, and then instead of just outputting the text, right, I'm going to output a link. A href equals, and then in here, inside the link, the text of the link is going to be the item, text of the item. So this is just your normal hyperlink. That here is the URL. So this is saying, like, when you click on this URL, it's going to take you there. I haven't put in the the URL yet. And then this is what the user is going to see, right? So then if I refresh here, now you see that they look like little hyperlinks, right? They have the underline and they're blue. And then when I hover over it, my cursor changes. So right now, if I click on them, they don't do anything. You can see that it kind of reloads, but they don't do anything. Okay. So now I have to think about the URL here that I'm going to be sending people to. So far, right, we've only really talked about sending information to the server using a form. The user fills out that form, and then they hit submit. The information gets sent to the server. And that's the only way that we've been sending information, but you can actually send information just with a URL, right? So but we kind of seen it before with the GET request, where we had that question mark and then the rest of the information. So here, this is what I'm going to do. So the URL that I'm going to be sending to is complete. So that's an action that I haven't created that action yet, right? But I'm going to be creating it. And that action, that when I send something to that URL, that's going to complete a task in my list, in my to-do list. So that's the URL. But now I also need to send that information about which task am I completing, right? Because if I just go to that URL, how would the server know which of the tasks to complete? So I'm going to send that information. This is the query parent, so question mark. And then I'm going to do ID equals. And here I'm going to do row 0. Okay. So what's going on here? So here we have some embedded Ruby, right? So this embedded Ruby is going to be evaluated when we're going through the form, just like this one right here. Like this one evaluated to the title in our to-do list, and that evaluates to, depending on what that task is, it evaluated to buy milk, study, Ruby, those things. This one is going to evaluate to the ID column in the table, right? Because when we created our table, we had ID, title, and complete. Those were our columns. So column 0 is the ID, column 1 is the title, and then column 2 is going to be the complete Boolean. Right? So right here, that's going to evaluate to the ID. Okay. So if I refresh, I don't see any difference, right? But now you've noticed, like if you hover over them at the bottom of the browser, you're going to see the URL that you would go to when you click on it. So if I click on this, well, for Sinatra, gives me this message because I haven't created the action. But look at the URL. In the URL, it says question mark ID equals 1, right? So that URL, that 1 is coming from having done row 0, because we're saying as part of the URL, place the row ID there. So another way that we can view this is if I look at the source code on this page, this is the HTML that I was actually generated, and you can see the href equals that question mark ID 1, and each one has a different ID. Right? Any questions on that?
Go back to the code for a second.
Sure.
Make that just a little bit bigger.
The font?
Yeah, just a font.
Sorry.
Give me numbers.
In the source code, if you go to the source code, what do you see there? Just ID equals nothing.
Yeah.
In your you're selecting everything from tasks. So
Finding tasks, yeah.
yeah,
Mine is crashing.
So when we look at the source code, it's just giving, instead of giving me a number for the,
So let's go to, looks like there is a 109. Or actually,
you can see the URL.
yeah, main, oh, sorry, main, URL 12. Oh, this is not square brackets, the pipes.
Oh,
anyone else have any questions? Everyone got it?
Yeah, my tasks all disappeared, like the links disappeared, the bullets are still there.
But let me take a look.
Let's look at it. You need an equals after the percent, so that it, inserts it. No, that one, the next percent.
I have my,
Yeah.
my computer, I have this map to escape.
Oh, gotcha.
So like, it's mostly memory.
Yeah, if it doesn't have the equals in the open text, then it just evaluates the expression, but it doesn't show it.
Gotcha. It's,
Ready? Oh, yeah, let's go back to code. So, yeah, that one should be 0, row 0. Now it should show everything. Go back to, let's see, let's go to,
Class 9 still is what?
I see.
Sometimes.
let me,
Yeah, it's,
That's like, yeah.
sometimes it's terminal that covers it.
make sure that.
Yeah, I can do that. Way more often. Like,
Oh, okay, I see. Yeah, there, it's not saying 9%. So, I think he might be
Yeah,
having
it's
some
another-
problem. So
Yes,
make sure and then we'll go.
Okay.
Did you look at the database?
Yeah, I'm trying to, inspect if there's anything in at rows.
It might be the same problem that she's having, so I'll go over it and then.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, so
yeah.
Primo, eso es el
This, oh man,
Yeah.
this just hurts me every time I try.
right there.
It just sticks.
So you got it? You good?
Yeah, I mean, there's that. Okay.
Okay. All right. So yeah, if some of you don't see you don't see the numbers, that might be because they're not in the database. So what
Yeah, just grab it, it's selected everything.
yeah, so I'm going to open up the database with the SQLite 3 command and then the name of the file, and then select star from tasks. And you can see that I have, if I move my window, you'll be able to see that I have IDs here. And I think not everyone has IDs there, right? Like numbers. Some of you guys are blank, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So I think when we created the table, it was created incorrectly. So let's recreate the table. So I'm going to exit. And then I'm just going to remove that file to rm to do that DB. So that just deletes the database file, and it's going to delete, all your data. So right now we can do it because we don't really have anything important, but just make sure that if it's important, don't delete it. So now I'm going to create the table again, SQLite3 to do that DB. Okay, so I think we posted this online, but the command is create table tasks, and then ID integer. So the ID is a type integer, and then you have to do primary key. So you have to tell SQLite that column is a primary key, and then if you tell it that it's a primary key, it's going to put an integer there if you don't specify it. Otherwise, it won't add it. Right? So you have to do integer primary key, and then title varchar, and then complete Boolean. And then now we have the correct table.
You actually go public and
yeah, SQLite3 to do that DB.
Can you let me see the first lines of the code? I got something missing.
This template,
Yeah,
that one.
yeah, just a little bit.
Question on that.
Yeah,
How come for complete you do Boolean instead of varchar?
because that one is I want it to be true or false, right? Whether if that task has been complete, I want that value to be true. If it's not been complete, I want it to be false. So I could I guess I could have done varchar for a string, right? But then
You have to do something else.
I want the type to be a Boolean.
So you could run Ruby and SQLite.
Say that again.
You could run Ruby and SQLite.
No, they're like the database has its own types. So just in Ruby, we don't specify, like when we create another variable, we don't specify the type of that variable, like what the type of that variable is going to be. But in SQL, when you're creating your tables, you have to specify the type of each column. Yeah, you can't just say, I'm going to have this column, and we don't know what type that's going to be. Yeah. So you want me to scroll down?
Yeah, the other.
So you don't need a comma after the last line, like Boolean?
No, yeah, no comma. Did you copy the code?
Just giving me a syntax error here.
Right, and so this is there's no,
Oh, they put key in there. Okay, I get it.
Remember, what is the step before you create a table? You create the file, or is
Oh, you just run the command SQLite3 to do that DB. And then even if there's no file, it's going to create it when you create the first table.
And then it goes inside and creates the table inside the file.
Yeah. So yeah, then you run the SQL here to create the table. Yeah. Yeah.
So random question. What was that?
Oh, yeah, you create a table. I think initially you made your table. And then that one, I'll go back.
No, because I.
And you also want to change it. Select start from task. And then that one.
You want to make sure we're all in your app. When inserting a Ruby code. That was really.
Oh, yeah, there's nothing in the table. So.
I'll go back. Let me see.
Yeah, that's just.
Oh, you know what?
Yeah.
Actually, I wanted to, I heard something about that last week.
Oh, you need a comment.
But if it
Yeah, so after every, this column, this column is that column. So now it thinks that this is just like, oh, she's a tiny bar chart.
Okay.
Yeah, the recreated database.
And and anyone we have.
just know that I'm good, it's just, my,
You got it?
the Cloud 9 just doesn't want to work for me, it's all.
Hey, you guys are good.
You good?
No, it's giving me an error.
Which
I think I got something still.
Let's see, so 21. Oh, we need an end for the do, even in our ERB, so percent end, right? So now, remember that every time you have a do, you need an end. And then the end, you also have to put it inside the scope. Okay, so now we have each class. All right, so we probably haven't set this variable. Oh yeah, because that's, you need that code for the actions. So you put it there for yeah.
I think that we have to. This has to be
What is the code for the href?
href,
Okay.
So let me put that's the get.
It's a second get? No, it's only one get, right?
There's only one get and one post. Yep. Okay. Yeah.
So should having recreated the table, that were the first one, and then recreated it, should it now work? Or do
You try it and see if it works. Yeah. Yeah. So while you're trying it, it worked.
Sorry, I think I need to let me.
Oh, okay, no problem. Yeah.
Work,
Yeah, it works.
but it doesn't light up.
it's just but here?
Oh, forever.
Yeah, because I had that issue before, so I stopped it and started it, closed out my terminal.
What's this?
That's what Vega did. I frankly don't know what Friday is.
Oh, okay, I see what you mean. So that was just a debugging statement, more advanced.
That's very close.
So, or which tab?
Right there.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
That should work now.
Okay.
It was just a debugging statement that was
Oh,
stopping.
okay, Brian was, okay, got it.
You got it. Cool. No.
I got one error.
Let's see, so here, okay, so you have it, right? That works. But, okay, so it's the same thing that there's not, well, the code here is not correct, so.
So that's the post action. So here's where you want to do the insert statement. That's the inserting into the database. So did it work for you, for recreating the table? Okay.
I still don't have enough for sure.
Yeah, let's see, so let's see,
Line probably stuck.
That looks a little better, right?
Yeah.
And so,
Actually,
give it a R, right?
refresh it. Because for some reason, it goes faster.
oh, okay. Okay.
I had the VIP call somewhere up there. Then, yeah.
Okay, we have an ID there.
Sure. I did everything from tax. Yeah, so just trying to look at the tax table.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's go check the other.
Oh. Could it be because of the party that I don't think they can measure the same.
Oh, so for these two records you just added?
Oh, because they can already go to.
Oh.
So it doesn't show it.
Same
They just adapt it.
Gotcha.
That doesn't put it in there.
Okay. That makes sense.
Is it because, is it case sensitive? So like from yes or is it to do?
Let's see.
Exclusive.
Say, let me try to put in.
That is confusing.
Okay.
Oh, I
Is it to
we're not in the.
do? And you to do, yeah.
There we go. Okay. So that's it. Okay.
You feel accomplished. I did that, something, but it's really nothing.
Okay, so let's see. Priority
Of course.
I just need to see the rest of the code on the page. And you just can-
This one right here?
Like,
Oh,
the,
scroll
the screen, yeah, I need to see the rest of the code.
I think. Oh, yeah,
I missed one.
title, I wanna say title.
Or something.
Miro, do you mind if I?
No, go ahead.
See.
Yeah.
Oops, hold on.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah. So you have another. Oh, I see. Oh, I see. Yeah, that's. Go to the first. Yeah. Close that. That's for ants. You was colder. Right. Yeah. So on these here, so you decide to use Okay, so it means that use is a project. Yeah,
Okay.
so,
So,
yeah, let's try, do you mind if I sit down for a second? Yeah. This is what's happening. It thinks that your project is used, so it doesn't think that this is your views, or it says, oh, you have a project called views. It happens to have.
yeah.
I love that we will bring in, I think that is the common space.
Yeah, I mean, it's,
Yeah.
it's just showing you, right, so your text has to be.
Or you were saying,
Okay, so anyone still has, yeah, go. What's the problem?
Yeah, that was,
App.rb.
this is the part that we minded because we got.
Oh, you need a comma right here?
What this other
Yes.
yes, I mean, I think it's because.
Thank you.
All right, any questions on that? You have a question?
No, I was just saying, like, keeping everything straight, so you have like your Ruby file and your ERB file, what Ruby do you put in your ERB file versus your RB file, and like, what's the best practice?
Oh, that's a good question, yeah. Yeah, so, yeah, because technically you could put all your code in your ERB file and nothing in the app.rb file, right? So the way to think about it is that the only code that you have in your template should be, the purpose of it should be for generating the HTML. Your ERB file, yep, yep. And then anything else should be in your RB file. So like loading from the database should be in your Ruby file. And doing any sort of calculations that you may have to do, like, you know, the equation of converting temperature, like that went in our RB file, not our ERB file. Because the idea is that the ERB file, the template, it's called the presentation area. So there, we should only be thinking about how are we presenting the data that we already calculated. We already did a whole bunch of work and to have values, different things. Now that we have all that data, how are we going to present it? Where are we going to put it? How are we going to show it? So that's the separation. Yeah.
Kind of like a restaurant, right? Like if you order a dish, it would be weird if your chef came to your table and made the dish. So like the view is like the dish is already made. Most of your logic is going to be in the Ruby side. I don't know if that made any sense.
Yeah, it makes sense to me.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I guess so that you don't want your chef to be messing around with it stuff in your table, and so like because the idea that can get pretty confusing if everything's all like together, and so it helps our brains to remember things better. If okay, here we're just going to have this type of thing, here we're just going to have this other type of thing, and so you're trying to separate. It's called separation of concerns, and so you're separating here in your Ruby file. Your concerns are loading things from a database, calculating things. In the template, the ERB file, your concern is just displaying information. So you're separating those two, or those concerns. A good question. Anyone else have any questions?
How do you connect everything so it runs correctly? Like that's my common mistake is something's not connecting like it should. So it doesn't go.
You have an example?
Like just connecting like what's in HTML or like what's in ERB to what's in Ruby. So when you write it in Sinatra, it shows like it. I still like lyrics.
Yeah. I mean, the main thing to remember is that in your Sinatra action, you want to make sure that you have an ERB, like a ERB something, right? And that is going to be called somewhere. And then for that, you need to make sure that you have that file, right? And then your form, you need to make sure that you have something that's going to handle that form submission. I don't know if does that make sense? What would you say?
I think I don't know. Are you asking about the conventions of Sinatra? Like where do I put everything so I know what I'm correctly?
Kind of like if there's like I don't know if there's such thing as that, but like maybe like kind of like when we first started with Ruby, it's like stuff had to go in order for it to work. Mm-hmm. And I guess it should still follow Ruby, but like now I see myself getting more confused. Like, well, does this go here or does it go down here, or like that type of thing? Order things properly.
So you're thinking in your Ruby code, maybe?
I think it might be the endpoints, right? It's like in a Ruby script, you go from top to bottom. And over here now we have like different.
Oh yeah, like.
Yeah, you have like an endpoint here that gets access at one point, and sometimes
Yeah.
So like that's the I understand.
Yeah, it can get confusing. So so right here in your Ruby file, like Vega was saying, think about it like these little sections of code. You're programming. How do you call them?
They're like, it's like an interface or like endpoints. Like that's a technical term, right?
That's a technical term. So yeah. So think about it like you're building an office building, and then one office is going to be like the CEO's office. Then the next office is going to be like, if you open it, maybe it's the bathroom. And then the next room, you open it, it's like the storage room, right? So each room has a specific purpose. And so when you're building the building, like you're going in order, right? So right here in this file, you're going in order. So this runs first, then this, then this, then this, And so it's going in order. This that you're building, you're telling Sinatra, okay, this room is going to be for this. This room is going to be for that. This room is going to be for that. And so at the end of this, at line 15, think of it like you built a building that's ready for people to use at that point. But yet no one has used any of those rooms yet. But you specify what the rooms are. So this is like specifying what each of those rooms do. And so like, okay, when you go in that room, that does these things. When you go, if you were to go in this room, does these other things, right? And so you have this set of rooms ready for use now, right? And now over here in the HTML, now you're telling the browser which rooms to use and when the rooms should be used. And so that's why it's a little bit more confusing, because over here, before we were like, Ruby was the only one that was really going and doing things. But now Ruby is doing things, but now Sinatra is like waiting for the browser, could be one browser, could be 20 browsers. And then those browsers are going to be sending like messages to Sinatra. And it's like, hey, I want this room. I want to access this room. So Sinatra says, okay, you want to access that room? Let me go to the instructions for what to do when you access that room. Okay, do that, then send back information. So yeah, that's what makes it more complicated. And so we have to remember, like, okay, what does this action do? Like, so when you go inside this action, what is it supposed to be doing? When you go inside this other action, what is it supposed to be doing? And then when you're coming up with these actions, you're thinking like, okay, I need an action that if I request that, it should do something, and then it should return what information should it return. Right? So here we have an action that when we do a GET request, it just selects all the tasks, and then it renders that template. And then that's the only thing that it does. Right? And this one, when I access the endpoint, I insert into the table, and then I'm going to tell the browser to redirect to this other URL. Right? And then next, we're going to be seeing another endpoint that when that endpoint gets access, we're going to mark a task as complete. So we're going to see that next, right? So you know, in your application, you could have like hundreds of these endpoints. Like, okay, when a request gets made for this endpoint, what do I want the server to do? And so here you're programming like all the lines of code. Here inside this do are the things that are going to run only when somebody does that request to the server. Does that make sense? Okay. You had a question?
I kind of forgot.
Okay.
We'll come back, I'm sure.
All right. All right. So so now what we want to do is we have this. There's like we click there, and then what we want is now we need to program that action, right? So now it's like we want to do a GET request for that URL, but we don't have that room yet. So it's like now we have to build that room. So now here I'm defining another endpoint, GET, and then but this one is complete. So when somebody accesses this complete action, like what do I want it to do, right? So because here I'm passing it in ID equals 3, that ID is going to be in a params, right? So I can access that piece of information, params, by doing params ID. I can access what that ID is. So I can do ID equals params.id, right? So now I want to update. I want to do an update to the database. So db.execute, and now I need to generate the SQL that is going to update that to complete. So we briefly cover how to do updates, but it's see update. I think it's update tasks set, and then the column that we want to update, so complete equals question mark, right? But all right, so what would happen if we did this? Anyone remember? So if we did that, it's going to update all the rows in that table to that value that we give it, right? So we need a where, yep. A where ID equals, and then I'm going to do another question mark. So we want to only update the rows that with the specific ID. There should only be one row with that ID, right? So that's equivalent to saying we're only updating one row in our database. So the first value should be true, because we are completing it. And then the second value should be this ID that we have from the parameters. So this should generate the SQL to update that. Yep.
So when you did params in the brackets ID, where is that pulling that ID from? Is that just because it knows the table has the first ID and it's assuming it's that, or is it?
That's a good question. So yeah, this line doesn't know anything about the database. But remember how I made my URL have a question mark ID equals 3? So I came up with that ID equals 3, and that's in my template. So that's right here, ID equals. So I'm setting that by creating my URL with that. So what happens when I do a GET request using that URL is that Sinatra looks at the thing after the question mark and then creates a hash from that. And so that's what params is. Params is just a hash that's created from the thing after the question mark, which is called the query string. So yeah, so if we had 10% foo equals 20. Oh, let me first show you what it looks like. In this action, I'm just going to return back params.inspect. So this is just going to be a string with what are the params, right? So if I do this, you see that it just returns to me a hash with ID 3, right? And then I can change this, what this URL is, foo equals ABC. So now you see that params changed to foo is the key, ABC is the value. So this URL, like right here, think of this as a hash as part of the URL. That's part of the URL, but it's kind of like a hash that I'm sending when I do a GET request. So the ampersand separates the values in the hash, and then the keys are the thing before the equals, and the values for those keys are the thing after the equals. Any other questions? So if we go back here, yeah, so this should give us the SQL, right? This should update that. Yep, back to the /. Yep, so redirect and then /. Yep. So let me see if it works. Let's see, study Ruby. Everything went away. And maybe my SQL is wrong. Let me see what my table looks like now.
Self-injection.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I think I deleted my database from we were talking about like recreating the database. So I think I don't have any tasks anymore. So buy milk. All right. That's this. All right. So now if I click there, yeah, it redirects me, right? Okay. So here's the code. All right, but here when I look at my tasks, I don't know if I've completed one or not, right? So so now I need a way to show whether a task is completed or not. So over here, for now, if I just want to show what in that column, the complete column, I'm at the end after the A, the close tag, I'm just going to put row 2. So that's the third column, right? Just to show it. So it's all the way here at the end. And I just want to show what that value is, row at 2, so that the third column. Just for now, right? Just to make sure that that it's working. Okay, so if I refresh, you can see that for buy milk, it's true, and then for the next one is false, right? So if I click this one, see that it changes it to true, right? So if I add another one, it adds false there, right? Starts out as false, and so it looks like it's working. When I click on it, it completes it, right? Everyone got to this part? Okay. But it's not nice, right, to show the value true if it's completed or not. So what we're going to do is we're going to make it a little nicer to look at. So I'm going to delete that again.
We don't put the logic for true and false. Just trying to see where it is that we gave it the true and false state.
Yep. So so right here is where we're saying change it to true, essentially, right? And then over here, when we first insert it into the table, see that we're saying false.
Yeah.
We're saying first set it to false. Right? When we first insert it, we're setting it to false. And then here we're saying change it to true.
And now we just do
if false, make it ugly,
Yeah,
or make it cute.
yep. Mhm. Yeah, so we can use an if statement, right? So I'm going to do it several ways. So I'm going to do an if statement. So if row 2 equals true, then I'm going to do what we normally are doing. Oh, sorry. If it's false, I'm going to do what we were doing before. Else, some way of making it ugly, right? Or what you said. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this have a class complete. And then I'm just going to display the text right here, right? So that's a lot of code. So I'll wait for people to catch up. Oh, actually, it should be a column 1, right? Because I want to display the text. So one is going to have the href, and then the other one's not having the href, right? So if that row is not complete, then it has a link. Otherwise, it doesn't have a link. Sure. Let me change the. So this is the originally what we had. That line doesn't change.
Right.
What's the LI again?
It's for list item. Yep. That's just to add the bullets. Yep.
Mine's crashed pretty epically.
All right, I go up, let's see, line 15. So we'll do line 15. Oh, see this, you put 2 equals false inside the brackets. And so you want to get row 2, you want to get the value of row at position 2, and then compare that to this one, the false here. Yep.
So let me make sure that that is correct. So you see that now the ones that are complete already don't have the link, right? And this one is not complete, so it has the link. But now I'm gonna do some CSS so that it's complete. It's just gonna have a line across it. So I'm gonna go to the style tags and then add for the class complete, do set decoration, line dash decoration. And then strike through. Not giving me, let's see. Text decoration. Okay, and then line.
Plagiarism.
Copy and paste. You can do that. So if I refresh, you can see that it has the line through it. So then if I click this one, see that it looks like it strikes it through. So another thing that I want to do is maybe I made a mistake, right? And I didn't want to complete that. So I want to be able to reverse it to make it false again. So now I'm just going to do another action for doing that. And so that's, I'm going to make this href equals, and then this is on complete. And then it follows the same pattern, right? Where I'm creating the URL with the ID for generating a link. It's just going to be a different action. So on complete ID equals row 0. And then this part can get confusing because you have to remember like when your bracket starts and bracket ends. And so like this part's confusing because I have a bracket right there and then a quote and then I have another bracket. So you just have to make sure that you every time you open them, make sure that you close them properly. So here's where I would put row 1. And remove this piece. I just moved. I mean, you might not have had it to begin with, but it's just the way that I was doing it. So you should have this. Let me put this in multiple lines so that it's easier to read. Okay, so you see that here I have my open li tag, then my close li tag, open a tag, close a tag, and then this is what's going to be inside the a tag. Then for the other one, it should be something very similar. Okay. So now this action, we haven't created that action yet, right? But we're passing it the same ID. So now we just have to create that action. So we have a complete action. So now I just need to create an incomplete action. ID equals params. And this one is going to be almost exactly the same thing. So I'm just going to copy and paste this. Except that I'm going to change it, instead of changing it to true, I'm going to change it to false. And here I'm going to redirect again. So it's almost the same identical code as our complete, except that it's setting it to false instead of true. And so now, if I refresh this, now I have a link, but it's strike through, right? And so now I can, uncomplete it. So now it's open, so it's kind of like toggling. Right? And then if I add another item, start is not complete, and then I click on it and it completes it. Right? Right, so yeah, go ahead.
William, if you're about to say something, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Okay, under ERB one, I just didn't see the CSS that you did.
Okay, so there's the class complete, and it's just text decoration, colon, line dash through. Yep. Yeah, I'll post this.
Just line dash story.
Yep, line dash two. Okay, so the two files should be there on Slack.
Are we just going for you today on
No, he requested them.
Mine are on strike through and should there be an easy fix for that?
They're not strike through.
They are and they're not. They're not undoing it.
Oh,
So if it's, if your tag is just 11%, then it doesn't.
I don't have one on
So try to save it. Yeah.
Can you look at also, if an error saying local variable.
Okay, that's on, 125. So let's go to 125. On tap that already. Oh, because he didn't define it. He didn't do ID equals 9.
Oh, okay, got it.
So he doesn't know what that error means.
Gotcha.
Each one has its own
Yeah,
scope.
yeah, sign the scope. I gotcha.
okay. So any questions? Cool. All right. So I think, yeah, last time we also had now we're going to move on to the Sinatra, the exercise that we had last time was this Sinatra exercise. So now we can take a look. I just wanted to take a look at some of the submissions. So here's, this is,
Was this the homework?
yeah. Yeah, this is the homework. So this is the old template. So this is when you want to see all the Chuck Norris jokes. So it looks like Body, a true Chuck Norris fan. Oh wow, they information on Chuck Norris. And then that's the head. Okay, so I think this is just an HTML page, but we actually want the Chuck Norris facts to be loaded from the database, right? All right, so this one, yeah, I think this one is correct, right? Because it's going rows.each, do I, and then it's just displaying the first column, and then ending.
Is that the old one?
Yep, that's the old one.
Okay.
And then this one is just saying, this one is just one fact, right? So that's not correct. So it should give us all the facts for all. And then when the user says no, Chuck Norris will get you, will buy. Yeah, I mean, that one is just going to be, it's not going to have any Ruby code. And then that makes Chuck sad. Okay, and then for yes, it's also going to be very similar because it's, yeah, it should have just one fact, right? And this one has many facts. So for this one, yeah, so here's just fact and just one thing. And then this one is just one fact as well. So now the form, here we have the select. We select yes, no, both. And then let's see, yeah, there's the submit. And then this is fact. And then this one looks correct as well. And then I think, yeah, this one's correct. And then here's the Sinatra code. So it's just one action, right? So the action is just, yeah, this one's not correct, right? Because that's not Ruby, right? We want to put that in, we would want to put that in quotes, first of all, right? Otherwise, you should get an error. But let's see, maybe this one. Yeah, so here, we're loading all the Chuck Norris facts. We are getting a random fact. And then rows is all the facts. And then if they answer yes, then we render this template yes. If they answer all, then we render the old template. If they answer no, we render the no template. So that's correct. Form is just, you know, sending back the form. And then for this one, that's the form. Okay, so here's an error, right? So this is going to give you an error because you can't have two definitions that are the same. Here we have the same URL and the same method. So we have two gets with the same URL, so that's not going to work. Oh, and then we have a get inside this, right? All right, so how about we try to do that exercise. I'm going to go back to my original application, and then here is my app.rb. So first I'm going to start with the app.rb. And here I'm loading all the facts. And then I have the random fact number. And then I'm rendering this test, right? And then this is just rendering the form, right? So I think I posted this on Slack. So you should have this code. So let me start that. So if I go to that, it says get fact, and then that just gives me a random fact number, or random Chuck Norris fact. I keep refreshing, right? So now, instead of just having nothing, I want to have a select to pick whether I want all or not. So in my form.erb, instead of get a fact, it's do you want to hear interesting fact? And then we have our select name equals response. And then here we're going to have the options. So option yes, no, and then all. I refresh this form. Now I have the drop down, right? And then let me change that from add to submit. Okay, so if I have yes, submit, you see that my URL changed to yes. Well, my URL has response equals yes, right? So now I want to use that information in my app.rb. So that's this fact right here. And that's what somebody did, right? So somebody said, if params response equals yes, then I'm going to render the yes template, which I haven't created, right? Else if params response equals no, then I'm going to render the no template. Else I'm going to render the old template. I could do if params response equals all, then render the old template. I think that's a little better, so that in case later on I add another select. So this response is coming from this this form where I have the select with the name response. So I pick that name response so that I have the response field in my form, and then in my app I'm going to use that response in my hash. Okay, so now I have to create all those views, the yes, no, and all. So let's see, new file, yes dot, it shouldn't be RB, it should be ERB. And then new file, no.erb. And then all.erb. So the no file is the easiest one, right? Because you can just say, so I have the, my HTML and body text. But here you can just say, forgot what you have to answer. Let's see. Okay, we'll just say something like no fact for you. So that's if they say no, I don't want to hear a fact, right? So now let me pick no and submit, and we render that template because we selected no. Now I'm going to do the yes. So the yes, I'm just going to be rendering the fact, right? Using that variable fact. And then if I go over here, you see that that's where I set that variable in my action. I set it in my action. So now if I do yes, see that it gives me the random Chuck Norris fact. And so that's the no template. And then that's the yes template. So they're very similar, right? And then the old template, so here in my app.rb, I have rows equals, but rows is not an instance variable, so I won't be able to access it from the template. So I have to change that variable to an instance variable. But you see that now that I changed that to an instance variable, I have to change all the references. Every time I use rows, I also have to change it to an instance variable here. So now in my all template, I can just do a loop, right? So I'm going to do rows that each do row, then end. And here, let's see, what position is it? I'm selecting just body, just the body column. So that means that it's position 0. Right? So row at 0. Then yeah, I'm going to put it in H1 tags. So here, if I do all, then I get all the Chuck Norris facts, right? Any questions? So the key to remember is that, like, take a look at your fact action. We loaded all the facts, and then we found a random fact right here. And then now, based on what we got passed when the action was called, based on that, we render a different template. Using the if and else if. And then my templates have different HTML. So this one says for no, right? This one is for yes, that is just showing one fact. And then this one is for everything, that's showing all the facts. Yeah.
I think I'm both on.
Yeah, I'll do it after class because there's a few files. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it on a site that has all the files together in the whole directory structure.
Now, this app file that we're working on is not the same app file that we just included from the previous exercise, right? Or did you build on that app file?
We did this last time.
I recall.
Yeah.
That
So-
was sure, but we're calling it the same name, which is app.rb, but we're just putting it under a different directory? Is that
Yeah,
correct?
Yeah, so this one, if you see, this one is under the Sinatra directory.
Okay.
And then our to-do app is under the to-do directory. So you want to create, for every new app that you're doing, you want to create a new directory just to keep things separate. Yeah,
I don't understand what it means by fact no. What does that mean?
so that's just the variable name. Right here, I'm setting that variable fact, I'm setting a variable fact no to this right here, right? And ran, you remember how the ran function works? Yeah, how does it work?
It just selects random numbers.
It generates a random number, yep. So here I'm passing it how many items there are in that array of rows, right? And so if there's 10 elements in the array of rows, that length is going to be 10. So then this is going to be evaluated to ran 10. And so that's going to generate a random number from 0 to 9. So fact num is going to be a random integer, an integer. And then now rows is the array with all our data that we got from select body from facts, right? From doing the SQL. And so it's an array. And so we can access it with the index, with an index. And so I'm passing it this random integer that I generated in the previous line. And then I'm accessing the 0th element because this is an array of arrays. And since I selected only the body column, the information that I'm looking for is going to be in the first element.
Suppose instead of body, you have that asterisk,
Yeah.
which is, I guess, the
Yeah, so that's all the columns. I'm getting all the columns. So with that, yeah, then you have to know the structure of the table. So in the other files that you got last time, or not last time, but the previous class, here I have how I created that table. So that table has 3 columns: ID, body, and favorite. Right. So if I did star, then it's going to give me a whole bunch of an array with where every element in that array is a row from the table. But then each of those elements are going to have three elements, which are the 3 rows. If I do the star, right? So now it's going to go in the order ID, body, favorite. So now I want to do the this column, which would be 1, ID 1, right? And so I would change that to 1. Sure. A little bit more. Okay, any other questions? All right, so I think we don't have much time for anything else. All right, so for next class, which is on Saturday, I'm gonna assign one short app to build, so you get more practice building these small apps, and then that should be it. Then next class, I think, hopefully we'll have time to go over Active Record, which is just makes it a little bit easier. Right now, we've been generating all the SQL ourselves, right? And so with Active Record is some Ruby code, is so that we're just going to be able to write Ruby code, and Active Record is going to generate that SQL for us. So it makes it a little bit easier. So there's going to be a final quiz on Saturday, not this week, but next week. And that's the last day of classes. And then I think, yeah, we're working on like a sheet of notes, study material to give you guys. That would probably not be ready until after Saturday, after class on Saturday. But it's going to cover, everything that we've been talking about: CSS, ERB, SQL. Yeah. And then I think that's it. Like we had planned to do a little bit of JavaScript this course, but I don't think we're going to have time for it. So we're going to save the JavaScript for the next course. So any questions? All right. So remember that Daisy's coming on Monday. And so if you have any questions about anything, yep. Sure.